Hello, everyone, and welcome. Let's get started right away so we can, for those in Europe where I am, you can get to dinner, and for those in the U.S., you can start doing what you need to do, and for those in Asia and Australia where it might be very late, we can get you guys to bed. So as we move forward, let's just do a little bit of housekeeping. I would like for you to, if you have a moment while we wait for more people to join, please check the chat. And in the chat, I have left a link at the top of the chat. So if you don't see it, please scroll up. And if you haven't already for yourself, or if you haven't already for your colleagues, please bookmark that link right at the top there. That has the coronavirus free premium in the link. And that is something that you could fill out. And if you fill that out, you will get a free premium license for yourself. Also potentially for other people as well. I'll repost it. Let me just see if, I'm not sure if you're able to scroll up. It was up at the top of the chat. I've reposted it. Can someone please confirm that you can now see the link in the chat, please? Okay, awesome. So as people talk, so now it's moving up, right? So you should be able to scroll up and find that link in the chat. So if you can take a moment to do that, that would be amazing. And if you do it on Twitter, on the screen, you should be able to see the Quizlet Twitter handle, as well as my own personal Twitter handle. I haven't been very good at being active on Twitter in the past, but I'm trying to do so a little bit more. So if you can tag me as well, that would be lovely, and I can interact with you on Twitter. So the chat is going to be for you. Thank you, Chad. I actually didn't know that. So when you first log in, the chat is blank. So if I had posted it before you logged in, you wouldn't have seen it. That's good to know. So we learn from each other, don't we? So what we're going to do today is again, we're going to use the chat to communicate with each other. From this moment forward, I probably won't check the chat very often. I want that to be something for you to, if I say something and you're an active Quizlet user and you want to expand on it a little bit for the colleagues, and there's something you might want to say or clarify for your colleagues, or something about your experience with Quizlet, or you want to ask them a question, then you should do so in the chat. If you want to ask me a question, there's a Q&A, and you can scroll up to the top and your Q&A button should be available. I'm not going to do the raised hand thing just because there's so many people in here, and I'm going to strictly use the Q&A for questions for me. The really cool thing about the Q&A that Zoom is now doing is you can upvote questions. So when someone asks a question, and if a lot of questions end up getting asked in the Q&A, then certain questions can be upvoted, and of course they'll stay at the top, and I'll be available to answer those questions. So without further ado, let's move forward. There was someone who said that when they locked back out and back in, the chat is completely clear and you're not able to see the link anymore. Don't worry, I'm going to do it again at the end of the session. And then I'm also going to, in the follow-up email that I send to you, that link is going to be there as well. So trust me, I'm going to make absolutely sure that everyone has access to the link to get the free premium. But I do really hope that you don't just do it for yourself, that you share with as many of your colleagues as possible, so that we can make sure that many people get access to that link. We've actually had a just unbelievably tremendous response. Apparently across the world, there's a lot of demand for Quizlet right now because of what we offer in terms of helping with distance learning, things that we can do within the platform that you can't do in any of the others, that help you consolidate a lot of the things that you want to do to help engage the students at home, and also to keep things a bit easier and centralized for the students and for their parents. So a lot of that is going to be discussed today in terms of what we're gonna talk about, and how I hope certain takeaways that I hope you can get. So let's move forward. What we're gonna do today is basically we're gonna go through Quizlet, but we're gonna go through Quizlet with the idea that we're going to talk about distance learning. Now, that means that I'm not going to do a true product tour of Quizlet. I hope that for those of you that are new to Quizlet, you're going to learn about the things that we can do, and you're going to be able to understand how Quizlet can be used for distance learning, And for those of you that are already familiar with Quizlet, I hope that you're going to get a little bit of a different perspective on some of the things that you can do, and you will apply some new techniques to your lesson planning and help you figure out how you're going to assess your students at home, how you're going to engage your students at home, and how you're going to be able to use Quizlet to do that. So we will introduce Quizlet just to make absolutely sure that I'm not leaving anyone behind. But if you are a frequent user of Quizlet, some of it you're gonna think, oh, I already know that. But actually, you might be surprised that I might say something that you didn't quite fully know that you could do within Quizlet. We're gonna follow that up with a sample lesson, and there's gonna be certain assumptions that I have to make that would make this lesson valid or usable to you. And then if we have time, I'm going to go through our mastery dashboards, which is a really nice feature. It's not, depending on what you want to accomplish, it's not 100% critical that you learn about it right now. And if I have time to go over them, I will. However, I do want to make sure it's clear that if after this session I don't cover something that you wanted to cover, if I don't answer one of your questions, or if there's certain gaps that need to be filled in, rest assured that not immediately, but at some point today, I'm going to follow with an email to every attendee, and you're going to get the slides. You're going to get a link to the actual session itself to watch at your own leisure. And of course, you're also going to get a link to all of our YouTube tutorials, and those tutorials are going to basically fill in a lot of those blanks for you. So if I don't get around to answering some things, or if I gloss over some things very quickly, rest assured, again, just kind of, just pay attention, think about the possibilities, ask questions, and don't get too bogged down in some of the nitty gritty product, features necessarily, because we're not going to really have time to go into them. It's a little bit more of a broad structure of what we're doing today. So just really quickly about myself, and the only reason I do this is hopefully to sort of lend some credence to the things that I'm saying, to sort of give you an idea that I actually have some classroom experience. I have classroom experience in a lot of things that I'm discussing here today. I work for Quizlet, but I have been a teacher for multiple years. I taught back in New Jersey for 7.5 years. Don't worry about the half, whatever. But anyway, I have a master's in education from Rutgers University. And I say that only because everything that I talk about today is based on my own classroom experience. More specifically, I was a big proponent during my time in the classroom of the flipped classroom. I was a big proponent of actually, really, to be honest, I have been doing distance learning for years before it was now mandatory in the current situation that we have today. And a lot of my feelings and a lot of the way that I would use Quizlet is informed by that experience. So I would always assign things for students to do at home that would be more of the learning aspect. If I wanted them to learn the concepts, if I want them to do some reading, watch some videos, do some activities that tested their critical thinking, I would absolutely have them do that at home. And then that would allow them to come back into the classroom, and we could have those discussions in the classroom environment without me just lecturing to them all the time, or having them do worksheets or having them do busy work. I could have them come in, and I could have a reasonable amount of security that they've actually understood some of the concepts based on their work at home. So I have a lot of experience with doing distance learning, because that's kind of what the flipped classroom does. It does distance learning, and then you have the classroom time to allow them to apply a lot of that learning. Now, unfortunately, we don't have the classroom component in the distance learning environment that we have today. So we still have to send information and send work home to the students for them to do, so they can learn the concepts that you want them to learn. But now we're trying to figure out how we get that classroom component integrated within our process. And if we can't do that at all, especially live, how can we at least rest assured that we can give the feedback that the students need, in order to sort of determine whether or not you should move forward in one direction or the other. So now I'm actually in London, UK, and unfortunately, I actually have a decent view of the skyline here. I wish that the video was a little bit better. But anyway, we moved to London back in 2018, and that was a great opportunity for me to try something a little bit different. And I now work for Zish, which is the name of the company, and we're the ones who make Quizlet. And I actually want to, if any of you are thinking about what your life might look like outside of teaching, outside of actually being in the classroom, definitely hit me up. It was actually a lot more, it was a lot tougher than I thought it would have been, and to try to find a job in the ed tech industry. And I think, there's a lot of reasons for that, but the number one reason is teachers, the way that we've created our community, for better or worse, it's very insular. And it's, unless you're a teacher that goes to conferences a lot, unless you're a teacher that's active on LinkedIn, if you make a decision that you want to sort of step outside of teaching for a little bit, you're going to find that your network isn't very useful, because you don't really nurture that network for the time that you're teaching. You kind of just talk within yourselves. And that's what I found for myself, and it's what I found for a lot of people that I know that have tried to do something a little different outside of teaching. So if you want some advice on things that you can do now, even if you have no desire to leave teaching ever, it doesn't hurt to have a little bit of things in place to ensure that you have some sort of plan, or backup plan if for some reason you're not going to be in the classroom anymore. So I'm happy to share that advice. I think it's really important that teachers have those options, and that they don't feel like that they just have to stay in the classroom their entire career, or if the only way to progress in the teaching community or in the teaching job market is to move directly into administration and things like that. There's a lot of other options, and I want you all to be aware of what those options are and what you can do to kind of prepare yourself if that decision does become something that is important to you. So please feel free to email me. You're all going to get an email from me after the session. Respond to me or talk to me through the website if you're interested in hearing more and some of the advice that I can give you. Okay, so I have mentioned that I'm going to do a brief Quizlet overview. And again, it's going to be brief because I want to get into how Quizlet can be used for distance learning. So we're just going to go into like 3 main aspects of Quizlet that we're going to expand upon a little bit later on. So essentially, a lot of people that already know about Quizlet know that we're a formative assessment platform. You can assign quizzes through Quizlet, and then those quizzes are student paced, so the students basically they move forward when they are ready to move forward. And you can also then assign resources like a PDF, a YouTube, or a web link. So we'll expand on that a little bit later. You can have a gamified environment. The gamified environment lives on the teacher side of the product. So it doesn't automatically show up for a student when they're taking the quiz. For them, it's just a quiz. But what often happens is teachers can project the game up onto a screen, a game up onto the screen, and then the students sort of engage with the game environment that is digitized up on the screen. But of course, you don't have to have a gamified environment. It's just, it is a quizzing platform at its core. So students can access their quizzes in the student portal that you can see here on the left for Tom Smith. And depending on how you set up your quizzes, you can have them take just one attempt or multiple attempts. And again, we'll look more into that in a few minutes. Now, the student engagement portion is unbelievably important. In fact, the surveys that when we've asked teachers what they are most concerned about regarding the distance learning that they now have to do and they haven't had a lot of time to prepare for, they're most concerned about student engagement. They're most concerned about this idea that they no longer have a lot of control, and they're not able to be there in the same room as their students like they were before. And that's very concerning to teachers. So that's where that gamification piece from before sort of helps engage the students and making sure that they have a very centralized dashboard to access the activities that you want them to perform. However, we also are very, very keen to help teachers get a lot of information out of the data that they can collect when the students do complete those activities. So there's 2 sides of the coin. There's what the students are doing and making sure that they're engaged, but at the same time, what information am I getting as a teacher that's going to help me have to incorporate the right interventions when it comes to the students and what direction I want them to go in next. And there's a lot of conversations and there's a lot of dialogue that needs to be very clear with you and your students, especially in a distance learning environment, where if you have a full understanding of what's going on based on the data that you're getting, then you should use that so that you can communicate with them. And that's actually what we pride ourselves on. So on an individual quiz, you assign an activity, you can analyze the results, and there's a ton of different pieces of data that you can collect and use for the short term, for the individual quiz. But at the same time, I can also look at long-term trends in terms of using a grade book or a mastery dashboard, where I can take a look at a student's long-term results and say, okay, they obviously have this particular topic and skill, they're doing okay. I don't need to keep hammering that in with them, but they actually need a little bit more work with this topic and skill. And I understand, like, a lot of the way that the mastery dashboard is built and used these days is to help students prepare for their cumulative exams, you know, end of year exams like STAR exams in Texas, or the Regents in New York, or whatever, what have you. And in other countries, it's, you know, there's a lot of different types of exams, and a lot of those exams have been canceled. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be tracking how students are doing relative to the skills and topics, because one, they're probably going to have to resume taking those quizzes in the next year, those tests in the next year. But also, you want to make sure that next year, when your other teachers are then taking your students, that you can feel relatively sure that the students have built that foundational knowledge that's necessary to move forward. And I'm sure you would hope as a teacher that the teachers that have your students now are doing the same for you before they move into your classroom. So that's what those mastery dashboards help you do. It's really powerful data that you can get on the teacher side when students take these assessments. And then lastly, the sort of coup de grace of the Quizlet experience is that we help centralize not just the assessments, but any follow-up resources that you think are useful to your students tied to the assessments that you give. So we have built-in differentiation, and this is what I'm going to go into a lot of depth today, where when you assign a quiz, depending on how the student performs on that quiz, you're then able to assign a follow-up resource that you think is appropriate, that you think will help them improve if they were to take the quiz again. So we're going to go through that sort of in a step-by-step way today, just a little bit. But just to quickly sort of elaborate on what that means, if a student does 50% or less on a quiz that you've assigned, you then can automatically have them complete some sort of follow-up activity for just that group. And oftentimes when students get less than 50%, a lot of the content knowledge that they're lacking is a little bit more basic. It could just be terminology. So you might assign a Quizlet set as a follow-up resource to students that got less than 50%, or a YouTube video that just goes through the basics and just helps students understand that basic terminology, so that when they end up taking the quiz again, you can be somewhat sure that that follow-up resource has helped them improve on multiple quiz attempts. So again, to kind of help let that sink in, we're going to go through that in a little bit of depth as we talk about our sample lesson plan today. Let's see. So we don't have any questions in the Q&A. Just want to remind everyone that if you're trying to ask me any questions, to make sure they go in the Q&A. I'm not gonna be able to check the chat, because if there's going to be too many comments, then it will be very difficult for me to reason out how to find those questions. So if you do have any questions, make sure they go in the Q&A, and that way I can address them for you. So for right now, looks like everyone's good. We can just press on forward. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go through a lesson plan where, and unfortunately I didn't have Quizlet when I was teaching, so I can only do a lesson plan based on discussions that I've had with teachers that use Quizlet very often, and of course just applying what I would have done if I were using Quizlet and if Quizlet were available to me when I was teaching. So a couple of assumptions have to be made. A sample lesson plan, because there's so many different things you can do within Quizlet, I have to sort of go down only one route to do a sample lesson plan, but I'll try to touch on some other possibilities that you could utilize if you decide to go a little bit off route here. So one of the assumptions that I'm going to make here is that we're using differentiation. I think for the distance learning environment, being able to assign follow-up activities to the students and keep everything centralized is critical to making sure that you're not overwhelming them with all these different resources that people are pushing you to use. And then by extension, you're pushing students to go to, and parents are trying to keep track of everything as well. So the more centralized everything is, I think the easier things are going to be. So if you use a differentiation feature, then you're coupling both your assessment and your lesson planning into one single place. The assumption is also going to be that everyone has some sort of learning management system, and whatever that is, you're using that LMS to communicate with your students. I think that for 99% of the people watching, you do have an LMS that's part of you, and you're communicating with your students. And then this lesson would not require live streaming. However, I will touch on how you could potentially incorporate live streaming, like live streaming through Zoom, like we're doing today, as part of your lesson plans. And then we do hope that you do have some software that can record your screen and do a voice and screen share, where you can basically share your screen, create a video, and then package that video and send it to your students to watch. So that last one is a bit of an assumption. I don't know what kind of software you guys have available through your school district or your school system, whatever that may be. But things like Screencastify seems to be the most popular tool to be able to do that. So if you don't have that available to you right now, I know that you can get Screencastify for free. The only limitation, I think, is that it's 5 minutes is the longest type of video that you can make. So if you can make a video that's less than 5 minutes, then you should get Screencastify because that's one of the best tools out there for basically doing that screen capture and creating a video to share with your students. All right, we do have a question. Let's check in on this. So the question is, do you set an assignment, then it automatically differentiates? So you know what, let me go through the process a little bit later. And if that answers your question, great. If not, then maybe ask it again and try to elaborate a little more so that I can make sure that I'm actually addressing whatever you're trying to learn. Okay, so we're now ready to set our assignment. We're setting a quiz for our students. That's what we're trying to do. Now, the thing that is very useful within Quizlet is being able to, one, set multiple assignments at the same time. So if you look on the right screen here, you have Tom Smith again. Notice how he has multiple assignments that are available to him. And the most recent assignments are going to be on the top, and then as you assign more things, they get pushed down to the bottom. So Tom is going to have access to every single assignment that you assign, and he's going to be able to access them through his student dashboard. And what you can do is you can make assignments available for a specific time period. So if you want to do things live with your student and you want all of your students taking the quiz at the same time, then you could set your activity to be live at, say, 2 p.m. And then you could tell them that the activity is either going to be available to take forever, or you can end when that activity is available to them. So I'm actually a proponent of always keeping activities open, just because I like for my students to have access to previous activities so that they can retake it multiple times and they can continue to use it as a review activity for themselves, which is also related to the number of attempts. You could also set the number of attempts, but I'm personally a proponent of always leaving it as an unlimited number. Now, the counterpoint to that is you'd want to get a grade potentially out of their first attempt because you're assessing them. Well, you still can do that. So I keep forgetting to incorporate this into the PowerPoint. But when you assign a quiz to your students and you have it set for multiple attempts, you can actually look at the student data and filter it by their first attempt. So you can simultaneously leave an activity open for students to take as many times as they'd like because it's an important review resource for them. But if you're interested in getting a grade from that activity, then all you have to do is look at the student results and filter by first attempt, if that's what you're interested in doing. So, just my own personal experience is that I like to leave things open for my students at all times. Don't be afraid to leave things open. If you want to use it for a grade, you can still get a grade out of it. There is no, okay, so there is a question. I will address this now. So it's asking if it has a lock feature, so students won't be able to open another tab, basically, and get information from another tab that obviously would be cheating or something along those lines. One of the things I will say, it's a pro, and there's a con to this as well. Everything within Quizlet is browser-based. So they can open it in their smartphone, they can open it in any browser, so from their smartphone, from iPad, from any computer, laptop, whatever. As long as they can access the internet and they can open a browser, they have access to Quizlet, which means that there's a really great accessibility option for a lot of students that have to share devices. So a lot of homes have only one laptop or one computer, and they have 3 kids, and all the kids need access to that computer so that they can do the things that that they're being told to do by their teachers. Well, with us, as you can't necessarily assume that all the kids have a smartphone, but there might be other devices that are available in the home. And if they do exist, then they can access Quizlet's quizzes because it's all browser based. So that's a big pro. So there's a huge accessibility pro regarding being able to access Quizlet. However, that also means that because it's open in a browser like Google Chrome, we have no control over what they do in their own Google Chrome browsers in their own devices. So unless they took home a device that has a program downloaded that includes Quizlet, where when they're using things within Quizlet, they literally can't open anything else. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to control whether or not they open other tabs or look stuff up. So that kind of brings me to some other things that are about my own personal experience, and it's something that may work for some of you and some that may work for others. But I would say that if there's a lot of different types of quizzes that you might want to assign to your students. Some are literally like, as this question says, they don't want students to use like Google Translate to basically just translate words for them. And that makes sense, of course. Unfortunately, we're not able to stop them from doing that because, again, they're using their own devices and it's all browser based. So we're not able to follow them into whatever other tabs they open. But if you can also ask them questions where they wouldn't be able to answer it just by looking it up, then you can get a little bit of an idea of how much the students are doing that. So it just depends on the type of quiz that you're trying to use. Okay, so we've assigned a quiz, right? We've assigned a quiz and we've set it for a specific time period. We've set the number of attempts that we want. You may have found the quiz in our marketplace, or you might have created the quiz yourself. So how do we communicate to the students that they need to access this quiz? Well, you can set up classes within Quizlet that allow students to access those quizzes in a variety of ways. Right off the bat, because I know a lot of people use Google Classroom, I need to go through this first, because so many of you, this is exactly how your students would do it. If you sync your class to your Google Classroom class, which is possible within Quizlet, then every single time you assign a quiz in Quizlet, it will automatically pop up in your students' Google Classroom stream. Like you never have to add students. Students always add themselves. You basically just provide the quiz and you direct them to go to the quiz. And as soon as they take it, they basically populate your Quizlet classroom on their own. So there's no reason to add students. And in Google Classroom, it's no different. So you assign a quiz and you can see that in the Google Classroom stream, it automatically pops up for the students in Google Classroom, and they can access everything through Google Classroom. They never actually have to go anywhere else. So that's, again, it goes back to the idea we want to centralize as much as possible with our students. Now, if you don't have Google Classroom, that's the only one that we have like a true integration where you can sign in Quizlet and automatically push it to Google Classroom. It's a little tougher with the other LMSs for a variety of reasons. One, a lot of the other LMSs have their own shoddy assessment tools. I use Schoology, and to be honest, I'm not happy with Schoology's assessments. They're not nearly as intuitive or powerful as really any of the other formative assessment platforms that you can use. But because they have their own assessment built in, technically, they actually don't like to have assessment platforms integrate with them. So that's true of a lot of LMSs, and it's something where we're trying to get integrated with as many LMSs as possible, so you can set an assignment in another LMS and it automatically set an assignment in Schoology, in Quizlet, and have it sent to your LMS automatically. But that's only possible right now with Google Classroom. If you are using a different LMS, it's not that hard to communicate with your students how to access their Quizlet quizzes. And basically, since it's always the same URL for the students to access, then it's going to be the same directions every single time. So here's an example of one of my old classes when I was teaching back in 2015. And basically what I would do if I wanted them to do a formative assessment through whatever tool I was using, I would just literally just put in the URL. They click on the URL and then they enter whatever the class code is for them to access the activities that you've set forth. And then you just give them your clear instructions, and it's a minimal number of steps to have students access your Quizlet quizzes. So it's not as centralized as it would have been if it were automatically sent through Google Classroom, but it's, you just have students constantly come back to your LMS and constantly come back to the communication that you give to them in your LMS, and then just paste the link real quick. They go to that link and they always enter the same class code, and it's very easy. We haven't got very many complaints at all about having students access their quizzes in this way. Very good. Actually, thank you for this feedback. So one of the questions, it's not really a question, it's actually a comment that I'm glad she put in the Q&A, because I was going to touch on this a little later. So one of the things that we're going to begin to explore is we're going to begin exploring whether or not we can set the time limit for a quiz. So once a student starts a quiz, they might have 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever, to complete the quiz. So we've actually built it currently that there's a time limit for individual questions, but at the same time, we've always felt strongly that we don't want students to be forced past a question without getting a chance to answer it. So just be aware, when you create quizzes within Quizlet, you can set a time limit for an individual question, but when that time limit hits 0, nothing happens. That's on purpose. We did that on purpose. The time limit is only for the gamification. The quicker they answer a question, the more points they get for answering it correctly. So when the timer hits 0, they can still answer the question. So it's not a time limit that pushes them forward. It's a time limit just to sort of calculate how many points they get if you're gamifying that quiz. However, Nelsie actually brings up a really good way to help you if you're someone who's afraid of teachers or afraid of students looking up answers. You can set the quiz to be available for a limited period of time. So let's go back a couple slides. Remember here, you can set the activity to start at a certain time and have it end at a certain time. If you're concerned with students using their time to look up answers to these questions or look up translations, then just limit the amount of time that they have to access the quiz. So you could say, listen, I'm setting a quiz. It's going to take you about 5 minutes to get through the quiz if you know your stuff and if you're not trying to look stuff up. So I'm going to set the quiz to be available for 7 minutes. And obviously you need to be very clear in your communication, because if they miss that communication, they're not going to show up at the time to take that quiz when you set. But set a quiz to start at 4 p.m. It's got to be done by 4:07 or 4:08. They might not have time to look up the answers or look up translations and be able to answer that correctly. So that's a really good suggestion. Thank you. So the questions and answers, can they be set to shuffle automatically to prevent it? So you can set as an activity setting, you can shuffle the questions, but that I'm not sure how that would really prevent the cheating, because that's usually more useful when students are sitting next to each other. So you can give the same quiz to multiple students, but you can shuffle the questions so that number 1 for student A is different than number 1 for student B. So if they're looking off each other's screen thinking that they can answer the questions in concert with one another, that wouldn't work if they're seeing different questions at different times. So unless they're actually talking to each other, they wouldn't be able to do that. Brings up another point. There's nothing to stop the students from texting each other while they're taking the quiz. So, there's a lot of concerns that come with giving assessments when you are assessing them at home. And I guess I don't have a lot of those answers, but I can say that it's possible we might want to sort of take a step back and sort of think about what we're trying to get out of these assessments. So every district and every school system is giving teachers different instructions or guidelines for what kind of grades that they have to get and give to give it to the district to determine how much the student has progressed and where they are and whether they pass or fail or whatever, and of course their transcripts. And I think that there's a lot of conversation that needs to happen, because obviously it's going to be very difficult to assess students honestly and to get those responses and be able to give them those grades. So I would say, I think maybe we take formative assessment and we treat it for what it is, which is formative assessment. And you might not have a lot of opportunity to do a lot of summative assessment in a way that you can be sure that students aren't sharing answers with each other or cheating. So I think one of the ways you can do that is to assess, to assess with a time limit, so that you don't give them much of an opportunity to share answers with one another. There are, another way is to sort of try to ask more, try to ask questions that are a little bit less, you just look up the answer based on what the definition is, and maybe it has a little bit more wrinkles in it. I realize that, those are harder questions to write, but, I think we might have to get a little bit more clever with the types of questions that we're going to be asking our students, because we can't prevent them, or it's very difficult to prevent them from talking to each other and consulting the internet and, to get the answers. I wish I had an answer to that question. It's just more food for thought. All right, so let's move forward. Okay, so where are we in our flow? We've basically, what we've done is we've created our quiz, and we are, we're assigning that quiz to our students. We've communicated to our students how to access the quiz. Now, once we do that, sorry, let me check the Q&A one more time. So there's a question about whether or not students have to create accounts. So there's a variety of ways for students to access your quizzes. I can't go into each one of them now because I do have tutorials that are going to fill in that blank, but I can answer the question to some extent. The idea with Quizlet is it's not just I'm going to assess my students and just get one piece of information out of the results of that quiz. We want you to be able to see long-term trends with your students. So they either have to enter their name the first time they enter the quiz, and then they can click their name next time they enter, or they can access through Google Classroom or their Google account or their email. There's literally 5 different ways that students could access your quizzes. But every single one of them gives you the ability to not just get the information from the student about that one quiz, but also get information about that student about multiple quizzes. So it's different than the other formative assessment platforms. It's a lot more around long-term data aggregation as opposed to just a single quiz as a quick hitter and be like, okay, I want to see how much my students understand. There's a lot more information you're getting out of it, but that information is only useful if you're able to tie that information to those individual students. So there needs to be some way for you to identify who the student is and how they're performing, not just on one quiz, but on 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 30, 50, whatever it is. So you can then generate a grade book. You can generate mastery dashboards where you can track individual student progress. And that's only possible if we're able to identify who the student is. So they don't necessarily have to create an account, but there has to be some way for us to be able to have the student access the same way every time and be able to identify who that student is. Again, I've got the tutorials. I'll send them out to you. When you initially set up your account, you can do, there's a quick start video that kind of explains how all of that works. You're welcome. Okay, so again, where are we? We've assigned our quiz and we've set it to be available to the students for a certain time. We've set it to be available for a certain time period. And we've also communicated with our students how they're going to access that quiz. Now we are going to set up follow-up activities. So this is the part I'm going to go and spend a little bit of time on to make sure you guys fully understand what this is going to look like, because I want you to be excited about using it, because this is really great for distance learning. So I mentioned it before. You have quizzes where, depending on how the students perform, you can assign a different follow-up activity based on that performance. Right now, it's locked in at 50 and 80%. So there's 3 buckets: less than 50, between 50 and 80, and greater than 80. We are exploring the possibility as a premium feature, which would be available to you until August 1st, that you can have more flexibility in those buckets. So if you don't want to be 50 and 80, it could be 25 and 60. It could be 70 and 90. It depends on what you think is appropriate for that activity. Let's take a quick look at how this is going to work. So basically, you get this opportunity to assign those resources. And what's really awesome about this, and again, it goes back to us being browser-based. So we're not overcomplicating having students having to download an app and then access things through an app that may or may not work or be compatible with other tools. If you can generate a web link, it can be a follow-up resource. And it could be a YouTube web link, and you could actually do YouTube itself, or it could be a web link to another tool that you may be paying for, or your school may be paying for, and something that you're used to using quite often. And a great example here is Nearpod. A lot of American schools have Nearpod, and things like Pear Deck is another one, Edpuzzle. There's a lot of different tools that basically are also browser-based. So when you access a Nearpod activity, and it might be something that your students have to sign into, all you have to do is generate the link to the Nearpod activity, paste it in as a follow-up resource, and when students click on that link, it's just going to bring them to Nearpod, and they're going to sign in. Now, that's awesome. So everything's centralized again, right? Everything I'm talking about today is about trying to centralize as many things as possible. Well, when students end up going to their Nearpod or to their YouTube video or to the simulations that you want them to do, then we're going to keep track of that progress as they go along, at least to an extent. So I'm going to go into that just about now. Now, when you've assigned your quizzes, okay, so we're kind of at the point here where we've pushed these activities out into the internet, and we're trusting that the students have access to them now. And of course, obviously you're going to have feedback from them. No, I can't see my activity. And it could be because something went wrong. It's probably because they're not following directions. Let's be honest, it's probably because they're not following directions. And, eventually you're going to get a cadence, and the first couple of times there might be a couple of things that go wrong. But once you sort of get into that routine, this is what it's going to look like from the teacher's side. So you've pushed out your activities, and you're going to have a dashboard on your end in your computer where you're able to access all of the activities that you've assigned, and you're going to be able to toggle between the different classes, because you're going to have 4 or 5 classes or whatever, and you're going to assign different things to those individual classes, and you're going to have different students in those individual classes. So you're able to go through your activity list, and that activity list is going to generate all of the data that you're collecting as your students are completing these activities. So this is where everything is going to sit here in your activity list. Quick, okay, we're good here. So now, let's take a look at what it's going to look like from the student side, right? So as a teacher, we've pushed out our activities, we've set our follow-up activities, and now you should probably see what it looks like from the student side, right? Here is the student dashboard. When they access your quizzes, however they access it, whether it's through Google Classroom or through going to zzi.sh, as I mentioned before, then this is what they're going to see. Every activity that you've assigned for that class is going to sit here in the student dashboard. And it could be one activity, it could be multiple activities. I've actually seen teachers' activity lists that have upwards of about 25 active activities all at the same time. That's possible. If you want to go nuts and you want to just assign 25 different things, 10 different things, 5 different things, and just make sure that they all do it by a certain date, or if you want to do it one at a time, it's completely up to you. It all sits in your activity list on the teacher side and in the student side and the student dashboard here. So when a student is now taking a differentiated activity, they're first going to be presented the quiz. So the student's going to take the quiz and they're going to get some result. Well, when I gave the directions for this activity, I directed the students through Schoology to keep taking the quiz until they get 3 stars. Well, this student only got 1 star, and they have a grade, but they don't know the grade yet because I've purposely set the settings so that they don't know what their percentage is. There's a lot of different ways you can set up your activities, but what I've done here is I've said, okay, the student's going to take a quiz, and I'm going to tell them to save and finish. I'm going to tell them to move forward, and when they save and finish and they move forward, now they're presented with an activity that I've set for them before they even took that quiz, right? So here is a YouTube video that they have to watch in order to try to improve upon their previous score. So they watch the video, okay? So it's all still done within Quizlet. The YouTube video pops up. If your students don't have access to YouTube because of your district settings, remember, any web link will work. So if they're blocked because it's YouTube, then if you can generate a web link through a different browser, or a different sort of application that you can access through a browser, then that'll work. Okay, as long as you can generate a web link. So they watch the video, and when they're done watching the video, they go back to the student dashboard, and there's a second attempt is presented to them of the same quiz. They try it a second time, and obviously I'm doing a little bit of an idealized version here, but presumably they improve because there's something about that video that has helped them understand maybe some basics that they didn't understand before. So as they continue to progress, they get presented with a different follow-up activity based on that improvement. Now, if they do poorly again the second time, they'll get the same video again. But as they improve, they're going to get a different video that's going to hopefully help them improve even further as they move forward. So the process is iterative, where you do it over and over until you get to the point where you feel comfortable that the student has achieved some level of mastery of that content, and it's being achieved and being presented through the quiz results. So here we can see that the student has taken the quiz at least 3 times, and they've been presented a different follow-up activity each time they've taken the quiz. So that's the student experience, right? Just kind of recap once again. So the student is going to go through an iterative process where they take the quiz, they do a follow-up activity, they take the quiz again, they do a follow-up activity, they take the quiz again until they are getting all or at least most of the questions right. So what does it look like for you as you're sort of trying to keep track of what the students are doing? Well, if you're looking back at the teacher's dashboard, you now have the ability to see how many students have watched or completed the follow-up activity that you've assigned for each group. And then you could also see which students have actually done it. So this is the part where you're getting a little bit of control and understanding of what's happening on the student side. Because again, that's very difficult when you're not looking over their shoulder, you're not able to walk up to their desk or into their group and actually talk to them. You need to have some idea of what's going on in the student's device. So if the students are not completing the watching of the YouTube video, then you're going to see them here in the started watching group, and they're not going to have indicated that they completed watching the video. And so you can keep track of which students are doing what, and you can then intervene if necessary if you feel like students aren't taking those follow-up resources as seriously as you would like them to. I feel like I've done a little bit of long bout of talking here. There haven't been any Q&A. I'm going to check the chat to see if there's anything interesting here that I can maybe comment on. Yes. Okay. So yeah, there's some things I can comment on. There's one thing where there's some talk about Quizlet. So we do have a Quizlet integration. So if you have a Quizlet set that you like, you can import it into Quizlet. So there's a lot of content that's in Quizlet that you can access, and you can have it imported into Quizlet. Now, there's some talk of student engagement again. I'm actually going to take a little bit of a detour, and I'm going to go back, and I'm going to go to right here, this screen here. So there's some talk about student engagement and the fact that competition is important for engaging the students. Now, one of the things that we unfortunately don't have built into the platform just yet is that when students take a quiz, they're only presented the gamification part. So if you're looking at my screen, look on the right here. This is one of our gamified versions. It's a leaderboard, and so you can have it so that every single student is on the leaderboard, or you can have it just the top 5. But there's a little bit of competition here with the individual students regarding helping to engage them through the quiz. Now, you can set this up as a live event with your students. Now, typically what teachers do is they take the gamified version and they project it up onto a screen. But there's nothing to stop you from taking the same gamification, say the leaderboard that we're seeing here, and project it directly into your students' devices using Zoom. So you can set up that live gaming experience with your students by having them set up the quiz in a browser on their right, and then they could have their Zoom screen on the left. And so on the left, they could see how they're faring against their fellow students, whether in the leaderboard game or in the team versus team game that we have. And on the right, they're actually taking the quiz. So they could get that gamified experience if you set it up to them live with Zoom. Unfortunately, we don't currently have it built in that the gamified version automatically is accessible to the students on the student side. It's something that we're exploring, and we hope to do that as soon as possible. But right now, that isn't possible. All right, let's take a look at the Q&A. Very good question about the basketball game. So we had 2 games. We added the leaderboard, but we removed hoops, which was a different game version. Hoops is coming back. Hoops would be a third gaming option that we would offer. Right now, it's on furlough because hoops, we have to tweak it because in large classes, it was glitching a lot. So basically, when there were classes that had like 25 to 30 students, it was the graphics were sort of not keeping up with the data that was being transferred back and forth, so it kept freezing. So we had to pull off hoops so we can work on it to make it a little bit more efficient so that in a class of 25 students or even more, the game doesn't freeze. So unfortunately, we couldn't leave it up there knowing that there were some classes that it was freezing in, even though a lot of people really did enjoy hoops. It was a good gaming option for them. But we're working on it to improve it so that we can add more, so we can have a third gaming option. And one thing that we're going to do over the summer is we really do hope to add some more gaming options as well. We fully understand. I want to make one thing very clear. We fully understand the importance of student engagement and student whether it's fun for the students. So we are 100% aware of that and keenly aware of that. And we're working to include more gaming options and to make it more engaging for students more than it is. We've gotten some great feedback about that classroom environment when you can put the leaderboard up on the screen, or if you can present the leaderboard to your students through their devices, that really ups the engagement of the students. But of course, we do know that there's more that can be done. We do really pride ourselves on the data the teacher gets. So, if you're looking to get some really insightful data on your students, then there's no better option. If you're looking to have automatic follow-up activities and keep everything centralized for your students, then there's no better option. All right, let's go. All right, so where are we? So we've set up our differentiated follow-up activities. The student has gone through the flow. They've taken the quiz and they've taken their follow-up activities. And now let's kind of take a look at what this looks like from the teacher's side. So again, you can keep track of whether or not the students have completed their activities. And on top of that, this is actually my favorite screen right here. This is the improvement screen. I keep harping on the data that you get as a teacher, an understanding of how much your students have learned as a result of the assessment. So this is where probably the biggest payoff is when you're doing differentiation and you're allowing students to take the quiz multiple times. You get a snapshot. Literally, we just simply track how much the students have improved through their multiple attempts, through their multiple tries. So this is a really powerful screen. And I'm going to kind of talk about what you can do with this screen and how it's going to help you figure out what you need to do moving forward. So you get 2 pieces of information here. When students take a quiz multiple times, you can see how much they've improved overall as an average from their first try to their last try. So, an example here is if the entire class has improved 58%, that's a pretty significant improvement. So this tells you that whatever you did between their first and last attempts, whether it's a live lesson, whether it's your follow-up activities that you've assigned to them through differentiation, you feel very confident that they were effective. On top of that, we can also get a breakdown of how individual students improved as a result of those follow-up activities. So obviously the data is skewed because I only have one student here, but I'm just trying to do this for demonstrative purposes. And what can we get out of this, right? So let's kind of look back here, and if there was very little student improvement, then there's an opportunity for dialogue, and there's an opportunity for you to sort of evaluate your whatever it is that you did as a lesson plan. And if they didn't improve very much from one attempt to their last, or even their second or third, then there's two things that you should probably do. One, I would start by getting student feedback. I would literally ask them, I would come out and say, hey, by the way, the class, do a poll with the class. I'm gonna get some feedback from the students, start a forum in my LMS. And I would say, listen, y'all only improved 7%, even though many of you did the quiz 2 to 3 times, 3 to 4 times. Can you please give me some feedback on what was, why wasn't this effective for you? The wording I use is probably perfect for high school students, but whatever their age is, and say, hey, she's like, hey, Johnny, why, why didn't you learn much from these activities in the lesson? And you're going to get some surprisingly honest responses and insightful responses. Students, when you give them that freedom and latitude to give you feedback, they usually take that pretty seriously, and they really appreciate being able to do that. If there's a big jump in in that improvement, then you can even ask them what they learned most from it, and you can get a lot of feedback from that as well. And then when you're looking at the individual students, well, there's another sort of flipped coin situation here, where if the entire class didn't improve, but one student did show a lot of improvement, you could target that student and say, hey, you seem to be, you're the only one that really seemed to improve. Can you tell me what it is that you learned most from these resources or from the lesson? And and then you can think about, how can I make sure that what this student experienced is similar to what the other students are supposed to experience? And then on the flip side, if there is a large improvement, like 58%, but there's a couple of students that barely improved, then you could also sort of target those students and ask them, what's going on with you guys? Why, what can I do to make sure that these lessons hit home a little bit better? And actually on top of that, especially in our distance learning environment situation that we have here, you might want to ask them if they're having difficulties accessing your quizzes, if they're having difficulties accessing a device, if there's something else going on that's sort of inhibiting their ability to sort of have the same outcomes as the rest of their students are. So you can kind of learn a little bit about how things are going at home, whether, what kind of support they're getting, and what you can do to kind of help support them, even though you're not there physically in the home with them. So, formative assessment is about two things. It's about assessing the students and assessing, what you need to do to help them. And it's also about assessing yourself. Again, if you don't get that large improvement from a quiz, then you want to reevaluate those resources or that lesson plan and see what you need to tweak to make it better the next time. So the last thing that I want to talk about is how do we communicate these results with our students? So a lot of the data that you get on the teacher side is very valuable to you, and it allows you to make all sorts of different types of interventions, again, about yourself, about your own teaching methods, about your own resources, and of course it helps you pinpoint which students you need to talk to about what. But also there's certain things that you can do to help review that activity, review the assessment, and do some sort of sharing with the students and kind of go over the assessment to make sure that they understand what the misconceptions were and what the correct answers were and why they were correct. So you can do this live. Again, you could always present live with your students through Zoom, just like you're in a classroom, just like you're presenting up on your screen. Or if that's not an available option for you, or you'd rather not spend that live time, because I know it's limited for you, maybe like 35 minutes a day, if that. If you'd rather just create a really succinct video that goes over the results of the quiz and presents it to your students so that they can watch it later, then you can do that as well with your Screencastify. And for those Apple users, Explain Everything is really great for like the iPad for iOS. So this is my second favorite screen. My first favorite was the improvements, because it gives you so much information about the efficacy of that lesson plan, of those resources. But there's also a screen that allows you to go through each individual question that the students have answered, and you're able to then present to them, because you can hide the names, you can show the names for yourself, but when you present to your students, you would hide the names, and you can go through whatever misconceptions you're seeing that the students are having as a result of their responses. So there's like 4 different possibilities here. On the top, you can have a question where, you know, a number of students answer the question wrong, and they all answer the same answer choice incorrectly. So that's an opportunity where you now know that there's some sort of specific misconception that you need to address with those students. It could be something that they've done, but it also could be something where if you see all of your students answering the same question wrong and they're all answering the same answer choice wrong, then again, self-evaluate, try to figure out if you've accidentally glossed over something that you didn't think was important, but now you're seeing from the results that it must have been. So you need to do an immediate intervention with your students now, but maybe in the future you do a little slight alteration to your resources and your lesson planning to make sure that you don't do that again, and make sure that the students actually get it the first time around. There's other scenarios. If you look at the next one down, most of the students got the question right, but one student got the question wrong. So a great opportunity to talk to that student and try to kind of get some information out of them, open up that dialogue, and try to figure out, you know, what did they miss? What did this individual student miss about this question? And it could be something to do with motivation, or it could be something to do that, you know, maybe it's a learning style for them. Maybe whatever you were trying to present to them just didn't resonate with them for some reason. You might have some separate activity you could ask them to do just to kind of help fill in those gaps. So, you know, there's other scenarios. A lot of students get, you know, the question wrong, but it's split evenly across the question. Might not be a great question. Maybe you need to just review that entire concept entirely because there's no results that you seem to be able to pinpoint exactly what the students misunderstood about that question. And then, you know, if you get one question where every single student gets it right, then great. Then, you know, you're on the right track with however you ask that question and however you've asked the students to learn about how to answer that question. Let's do another Q&A check. We're pretty much towards the end. Lori, good question. So we have what's called math mode for those math teachers out there. I have a couple comments about math, entering math problems. So it is a little bit ungainly to enter math problems because you have to use a coding thing called LaTeX. And we offer the help articles, but I understand that that's not an enjoyable thing to do for a lot of math teachers. And so they want to be able to create problems that are a lot easier with a math problem. I will say that my recommendation is if you're a middle school or an elementary school teacher, and to some extent high school, I would actually recommend, if you're looking for math quizzes that are already created that might be useful to you, search for quizzes that are created in Texas. We probably have, well, Texas, and also search for Common Core. We have a huge library of quizzes that are created from teachers in Texas, and a huge library of quizzes that are created that are tagged to the Common Core. And you're going to find a ton of math content that I think is going to be very useful to you, so that you don't have to enter, you don't have to create your own quizzes. And then you can easily edit those quizzes to make them your own. So you can find Common and Texas quizzes. You're going to see a lot of math content that's going to be very useful. But in regards to making it easier, it's a plan. We do want to incorporate a calculator sort of UI, so that instead of having to enter any LaTeX, you can just click on the calculator and it'll produce the LaTeX for you, so that you can more easily create math problems. We are aware that we want to make it more user-friendly for math teachers. Okay, now it has been about an hour, I think. So I think we're good. I didn't get a chance to talk about mastery dashboards, but I'm going to include a lot of information mastery dashboard in the tutorials that I'll send everyone when I get. I'm going to do 5 p.m. Eastern time, so I want to get everyone their resources right after I do all 3 sessions. And if you have any last-minute questions, I think now is a good time to ask them. And yeah, I'll check the chat again to see if there's any chatter that I can respond to. about middle school. I will say that middle school is the highest number. Really, most of our teachers are actually middle school teachers, especially again in Texas. We have a huge number of teachers in Texas. There's a lot of content in the system that's for middle school for both math, science, English, or ELA, world language. There's a ton of world language content in there, especially since a lot of world language teachers use Quizlet, and so there's a lot of content in our system that has been imported from Quizlet. So all right. So there's questions about courses. If you want to stick around, what I'm going to do is I can actually do a little bit of a sort of walkthrough on what the courses are, because it's related to mastery dashboards. Again, the courses are explained in the Quizlet. Is Quizlet down, or is our ability to import Quizlet down? Oh no. Okay, well, Quizlet is down apparently. Listen, I totally empathize with them because, again, I mentioned earlier about what it's like to move from teaching into a different role outside of teaching. I can give you some really funny stories about what it's like to move from teaching into working for an ed tech company. And, you know, I think all of you would benefit from getting a little bit of insight into just kind of how things work from a tech side. A company like Quizlet, which is quite large, we're a lot younger than Quizlet. Yes, the basketball game is coming back. I just don't know when. I just don't know exactly when. But we've gotten a lot of feedback that kids love it. So yeah, we're definitely gonna bring that back. But you know, just talking about the whole Quizlet thing, Quizlet being down, you'd be surprised how few people actually work for these companies and how few tech developers there are and how much work that they do. So every time you come in with a support question and you want something to be the way it is, just think about this. When I left teaching, when I started working for Zish and Quizlet, I had so many ideas. I was like, we should do this, we should do this, we should do this. And you just learn really quickly that what sounds like a really simple thing just flat out isn't. And a lot of my suggestions did get incorporated, but there's some things where it just would have taken such a massive overhaul of things that were already built. So often, if you guys come in with support questions, you're probably talking to me when you come in with support questions through the website. And oftentimes, what I'll do is I'll say, okay, if it's not working exactly the way that you want it to, then we always put it on sort of a list of priorities and things that we know based on teacher feedback that we know we'd like to change to make it easier for the teachers. But it is based on sort of how many teachers request it and how important it is, because obviously we can't do everything. And in regards to Quizlet being down, it just happens and it sucks. And I know that when that happens and you're trying to teach and the servers go down or something happens, and it just becomes, it's really difficult for you to overcome that as a teacher. I will say that, you know, when I was teaching, our internet would be spotty at times. I used Apple TV a lot, and if it didn't work, I always had a backup plan. So I just like always, if you're relying on tech, you have to have backup plans. Even the biggest, most amazing companies that have the most expensive servers, it just sometimes goes down. And if you're trying to access it at this moment and you don't have a backup plan, it's just going to make things worse. So always have something available to you to kind of help you know, give your students something to do or to teach them if what you planned doesn't work. Okay, so last thing I'll do is I'm gonna cut out of here, and we're gonna do a really quick look at the mastery dashboards so you can help understand a little bit about what the courses are. So here is our this is our sort of our demo account for looking at our mastery dashboards. So we'll cut out of here. And what I think a lot of you are asking about is this portion right here, your courses. So when you create a class, especially the first class that you create, it's going to ask you what course do you teach. Really all that means is what subjects do you teach. And what that's going to help us do is it's going to help us filter your content that's something more relevant to you. In order to search for specifically Texas content, like I mentioned before, yes, you might want to add Texas as one of your courses because that's going to help you search for that Texas content. But you could also, again, you could, if for you math teachers, let's say that we want to look for questions that are related to linear equations. So when you do that, you get a whole bunch of content that's relevant to you, like 7,290 results that are something to do with linear equations. And here's some of that math, that Texas content. And if you want to filter into content that is, again, has been tagged to something that is relevant to you, yes, when you start to do your filtering here, I have a ton of quizzes already added. You could start to filter by that content. So now I'm looking for linear equations, and I'm looking for content that is tagged to the Texas State curriculum. And I can continue to drill down into something that is a bit more focused for what I'm looking for. So I search for linear equations, and now I might not have picked an appropriate grade level here, but you would know better about your own grade. But you can start to filter and narrow it down into content that's very relevant to you. When it comes to that course, if you have a course added into your system, then all you have to do is click on the course, and it's automatically going to filter results for you based on that course. And so course is basically a curriculum, like North Carolina curriculum standards, grade level, and subject. So if you could start to filter things that are very useful to you. And again, I can tell you that if you're looking for content, Texas, Common Core, and actually I forgot to mention this one, North Carolina is also one that we have a lot of content for. So start there, and what you can do is you can find a quiz that you can take a look at the quiz by clicking on it. You could look at the questions. You can you could start to you could show the answers or not show the answers, because we actually are now allowing students to access these quizzes without actually having them be assigned, but the students wouldn't be able to see the answers. And then once you sort of vet the quiz a little bit, if you want to change some things, you can go ahead and edit the questions. And if you are the owner of the quiz, then you'll just edit it directly. But if you're not the owner, it's going to make a copy so that you can edit it for your own purposes. Okay, so, and again, anything I haven't covered, this is actually one of the longest sessions that I've done. So anything I haven't covered, I have actually covered more here than I might have in other ones. So this is going to be a pretty valuable one when I put it up on YouTube. But don't worry, like there's going to be tutorials that go home in my follow-up email that you'll get either tonight or sometime tomorrow. And yeah, there definitely will be enough for you to get started. I look forward to helping all of you. And as a last sort of parting request, if you haven't already done so, please share the link I just put in the chat. This is so you can get the, okay, cool. So this is so you can get premium access, which opens up a lot of your data accumulation, which is limited under a free account. And I'd really like for you to share this with other teachers as well, so that we can get more teachers access to the premium. And hopefully, if you think that what we've done today is something that is valuable to you, please share it so that other teachers can see a future webinar, and potentially they can start incorporating this into their classrooms as well. So I really thank everyone for being here, and yeah, have a great day. Oh, enjoy your holiday, and hopefully tomorrow you can have some time to relax and spend time with family without some of the pressures of all the distance learning stuff that you have to do now. Okay. Take care.